Going to start the meeting in just another minute, folks. Let's give another minute just for folks to trickle in. Okay, Dickon, I think we're ready to get started.
All right. This is Dickon Crane, and I'd like to welcome you to the Massachusetts Forest Alliance Annual Meeting. We tried to arrange an in-person meeting, but the residual impacts of COVID made that almost impossible. So here we are on Zoom again. And but on the good side, the travel time is nil, and everybody will have all afternoon to get outside and enjoy this beautiful day. I'd like to thank our sponsors and hope you enjoy their presentations as well as our speakers. And we have some great award recipients. So let me turn the meeting back over to Chris. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Dickon. Some quick logistics for the meeting. It's being recorded and we will post this on YouTube next week. So if people missed it, you can point them there. The link will be in the Forest Update e-newsletter going out in November. You received a reminder message an hour ago about the meeting, and in there was a link to download the program book for the meeting. So if you didn't get that and didn't get a chance to download it, I've put the link into the chat. We will be referencing the program book in terms of our financial report, minutes of the last annual meeting, etc., briefly during this meeting. So you may want to have that. Zoom webinars are a little bit different than Zoom meetings. We can't see you. Only the panelists will be visible to you when they're speaking. There's both a chat and a Q&A box. So the chat is there just in case you need to communicate some issues or problems or want to say something to the presenters or whatever. But if you have questions as we go through our presentations, please put those in the Q&A box with our keynote presentation and other presentations. So please direct those to the Q&A box, just makes it a little neater for us. We got a bunch of attendees today, so we're going to do our best to get to the questions during those presentations. We might not get to all of them. And then the big question everyone has every annual meeting is, when am I getting my credit certificate? So those will be sent by email. After this meeting is over, Zoom sends me a list of the people who actually attended, and then I take that list, I create credit certificates and email those to folks. So that will happen by the end of next week. So it's busy, but I will get to them by the end of next week. So please give me just until the end of next week to get those out to you. We're able to make this meeting free to you today because we've got a couple of great sponsors. And the first one is Farm Credit East, and they have been a sponsor of the annual meeting for some time. And with us today from Farm Credit East is Chris Lawton, and I'm going to turn things over to him.
Thank you very much, Chris. Let me share my screen. Let me know when you can see this.
We can see it, yep.
Okay, great. So I just have 5 minutes, so I'll be pretty quick, but I just want to go through a brief introduction to Farm Credit East and who we are and what we do. So Some of you may be familiar with us, others not perhaps, but Farm Credit East is a member of the National Farm Credit System, which covers the entire country. We are the affiliate that serves New England, New York, and New Jersey. We have more than 18,000 customers across 8 states in the Northeast and more than $10 billion invested in Northeast farming, fishing, and forestry. We often use farming language when we describe ourselves and our services, but forest products and forest product producers are an integral part of our cooperative, and we are very pleased to serve the forest products industry. Here's a map of our service area. We have 25 offices throughout the region and a staff of almost 600 at this point. This is a brief, a chart of our loan portfolio. As you can see, forest products make up, actually, it's a little more than 10% now of our total portfolio, which is pretty significant. That is the equivalent of about $1 billion invested. And we serve all types of producers, ranging from large forest landowners to individual loggers that are owner operators with a couple pieces of equipment. We have a full suite of business services, including tax prep, appraisal, estate planning, business consulting, record keeping, and payroll. And I do want to mention briefly our Farm Start program. Farm Start is a program that we have for beginning forest products entrepreneurs and farm entrepreneurs. It invests up to $75,000 in operating capital for a startup or early stage business that can be used for equipment or operating expenses. And the starters have up to 5 years to pay it back or roll it into conventional financing. So it's designed for people that might not ordinarily qualify for a loan from us. There's no collateral or down payment required. And it's helped quite a few people actually get started in the forest products industry. So, if you'd like more information on that, please feel free to check out our website, farmcrediteast.com, or email me and I will respond to you. There's my email on the screen. I will put it in the chat as well, so you can see it if you have any questions to follow up, because like I said, I don't have a lot of time, but I see that I have about 3 minutes left. So if there's 1 or 2 people with questions, maybe we can entertain those. Chris, Egan?
Yeah, that's fine. People can put questions into the Q&A box if they have any for you.
If not, I will just say that we're very pleased to sponsor this meeting, and hope you have a great meeting and hope you're enjoying the fall weather.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, we're very grateful for your sponsorship. If anyone does have any questions at the moment, Chris has put his email address into the chat for future, but any other questions at the moment? All right, well.
Have a great morning, Chris.
All right, thanks so much for your time today, Chris, and for your sponsorship. Really appreciate it. We encourage everyone to take advantage of Farm Credit East and the great services they provide. Okay, we'll move on to our next item, which is our first award presentation, which is the Douglas B. Cook Wood Producer of the Year Award winner. And to present that award, I'm welcoming Bill Hull.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Bill Hull, CEO of Hull Forest Products. It's my pleasure this morning to present the Douglas Cook Award to Ed Brightman Sr. The Doug Cook Award, Wood Producer of the Year, is named for the late Doug Cook, who was an MFA board member and the owner of Cook Forest Products in Upton, Mass. Doug was a leader in the forest products industry, known for his spirit of innovation and determination to grow the forest economy. Doug, unfortunately, passed away unexpectedly in 2018. This year's Cook Award goes to Ed Brightman Sr. of Brightman Lumber Company in Assonet, Mass. I have known the Brightman family since Ed was a teenager, when he, his dad John, and his brother Johnny worked for several years logging for Hull Forest Products. With Ed's son, Ed Jr., now running the pine sawmill, and Ed's sister Patty running the office, Ed is the harvesting end of this now 5th generation forest products business. A natural entrepreneur, Ed started a firewood business in his teens and continues to strive to make the highest and best use of wood from their land clearing jobs today. Not set in his ways, Ed is always looking at the latest technology and new strategies and techniques to improve efficiency and the quality of his work. Ed has been a skilled timber sports competitor for several decades, frequently competing at the annual Freiburg Fair Woodsman's Field Day, where he won the world champion axe throwing contest. At Deerfield, New Hampshire, Ed won and still currently holds the world champion chainsawing record in the 8x8 white pine category. These competitions over the years have been a creative way to spread the word to younger people about the forest products industry. Ed has been known for his generosity and consideration for others. He once lost a land clearing job very close to his mill to Doug Cook, for whom this award is named. Despite losing the bid, he offered to allow Doug and his workers to use his yard and office during the job. He routinely looks out for others and works to strengthen the forest products industry as a whole. Ed has been an ambassador for the forest products industry in Southern New England. Ed, we're very glad to honor you today. Congratulations.
You gotta move.
Right, so we put him in there to show him.
You gotta sit down.
Sit down. If
Don't
you're gonna
look at
talk,
the camera.
you're gonna see yourself right in there. Ed. See,
So now they can see you.
say hello.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning, Ed. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
You'd like to say a few words to accept the award? That now is the time.
Well, I was very shocked. My mom and my sister and I and my wife, we went out to dinner last Sunday, and when we got done with dinner, they said they had something for me. And I saw the package, and when they brought that out, I couldn't believe it, that I won that award. I didn't know I was so popular. But I just want to thank everybody else I've worked with in the past. Bill Hull was unbelievable working with him out there for, I don't know, we think we worked for him for 7 or 8 years and lived out there in a trailer, and he always took very good care of us. And I want to thank him very much for all his support that he's given me and taught me a lot of things about the wood industry. So I don't know what else to say. I don't know if you have any questions or.
No, I think that's great, Ed. Certainly, this is an award that's very well deserved, and you've done a lot for the industry, especially in your area. We're really grateful for all you've done during the course of your career. So thank you again, and it's terrific to honor you with this award today.
Thank you very much again.
All right.
Okay, you're done. Did you like it?
Yeah.
Did you see your picture of you?
All right. Well, thanks very much. We're going to move on here. And the next item on the agenda is our keynote presentation. We're very pleased to have Dr. Isabel Munck with us from the U.S. Forest Service. Dr. Munck is a plant pathologist working out of Durham, New Hampshire. She's done quite a bit of research on diseases and pests that hurt our trees. She's done quite a bit of work on eastern white pine and hemlock in particular in our area. And she's going to discuss some of that with us and also talk about sentinel gardens and arboreta and the way that they can help detect forthcoming and future pests. So I'm happy to turn things over to Dr. Munck.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for the introduction and the opportunity to speak to your group today. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you. If you want to go ahead and share your screen, you should be able to do that.
Okay. Do you see that?
We can see it. Yep.
Okay. So yeah, Chris asked me to talk about management of forest diseases, and we have spent a lot of time. Well, let me back up for a second. I work for the Forest Service. Most of the Forest Service personnel and resources are spent in our national forest system, like the White Mountain and the Green Mountain National Forest. But our group is state and private. So the premise is that insect and diseases, and other issues like watersheds, they don't recognize geographic or political boundaries. So we work with, as the name states, state and private. We work with all landowners to protect the forest resource. And because our office serves New England and New York, we spend a lot of time working on white pine issues because Eastern white pine is such an important forest resource. 4.1 million acres in New England and New York are forested with white pine. And the estimated value of white pine saw logs in the US, this is the entire country, is $18.6 billion. I think for New England, it's $4 billion. This map was created by our GIS specialist in our office, and it shows the basal area of white pine. You can see that, of course, there's a lot of white pine in Massachusetts, southern and New Hampshire and Maine. And historically, it's been a really important tree. Events related to the pine tree riot in New Hampshire in 1772, which was a conflict between colonists or when New Hampshire was a colony of England, it was a conflict between the people that were guarding the king's trees for the Navy, and the colonists who wanted the lumber for construction and so forth. It's also really important for wildlife. A lot of mammals and birds eat the seed, and large bird species like the American eagle and blue herons like to build their nest on their branches because they have enormous nests and their branches can withhold the weight of their nests. And now I'm going to shift to the diseases of white pine. And a very important concept in pathology and plant pathology is because plants are static, the environment plays a huge role in diseases of plants. So this concept is the disease triangle, which is a disease is the interaction between a virulent pathogen, a susceptible host, and the environment that's conducive. Okay, and let me go back that. For things that are exotic or introduced, the environment plays a smaller role because the host is so susceptible. So in the case of white pine blister rust, that is an exotic disease. The trees didn't co-evolve with a white pine blister rust. So therefore the trees are pretty susceptible and the environment is not as important compared to some of our native diseases where the environment is very important because the tree and the pathogen have co-evolved together. So historic pests of white pine have been white pine blister rust, which was introduced in the 1900s, and white pine weevil, which is a native insect that really likes the shoots of very healthy and sturdy young white pine regeneration. And because of all the old field abandonment that we've had in New England, we've had a lot of fields of young white pine that were very susceptible to the weevil. And the weevil, they lay eggs in the shoots, and then the larvae grow down the shoot, kills the shoot. The main leader loses the dominance, and then you have multi-stem trees, which are okay for a landscape setting, but may lose some timber value. But over the last at least 10 years or 10 to 20 years, we've had a lot of issues with other pests, including Caliciopsis canker and something we call white pine needle damage, because we didn't know what caused it in the beginning. So we gave it a general name, but it's actually caused by several foliar diseases of white pine. Now, Caliciopsis canker was first described in the late 1800s in New York, and then it was completely ignored. We think because, then white pine blister rust was introduced and the symptoms are similar, and perhaps people thought that trees with Caliciopsis have blister rust, or it just wasn't as important. The white pine needle damage and the foliar diseases are also native and have been here for a long time, but were reported to cause very little damage. And for some reason, in the last 10 years, have been causing more damage. So a lot of our work has been centered on these newer pests of white pine. And this is a picture of a stand somewhere in Western New Hampshire that it's a pole-sized stand. The trees are about 9 inches in diameter at DVH. You can see that they have copious resin flowing down the bowl. And these are the stands that are most susceptible to Caliciopsis canker. The picture on the left is a mature tree in Massachusetts. Again, it's showing the resin down the bowl. And the picture on the right is a young seedling or regeneration. Underneath the whorl, there's a canker. And out of the canker, there's little black structures coming out that look like eyelashes. That's the actual fungus causing the canker, the Caliciopsis canker. So we didn't know what site factors were important for Caliciopsis or what management recommendations we could provide. And we did an initial survey where we did a complete inventory of all the FIA, so the Forest Inventory Analysis plots on public lands in New England. And FIA plots are established, were established at the beginning of the 1900s by the Forest Service. I think in 1930 is when they were established, and they're revisited periodically. So we have a lot of information about them. And from visiting those plots, it seemed like soil and stand density was important. So then we did a more in-depth survey across soil types. We worked with folks from NRCS, Natural Resource Conservation. I'm really bad with acronyms. NRCS. And the soil scientists helped us categorize the soils into categories of very dry, loamy, and shallow. And pine usually does really well in well-drained, deep, sandy soils. I mean, it actually does well in all kinds of soil types, but in those soils, it can outcompete its hardwood, other hardwood trees. It does grow in shallow soils, but shallow, it's susceptible to the water table going up and down in shallow soils. So what we found, first of all, is that Caliciopsis was all over the place. The map has red squares, and then all those red squares, we found Caliciopsis. There's only a few stands that are represented by blue circles where we didn't find Caliciopsis. And then when we looked at the amount of trees or the percentage of trees with Caliciopsis across soil types, on the y-axis, there's a proportion from 0 to 1. So we looked at saw timber stands and pole timber size stands. So stands bigger than 9 inches or smaller, where the mean diameter was bigger than 9 inches or smaller than 9 inches at DVH. And the pattern is the same. It's just that in pole-sized stands, we see more trees with symptoms. Basically, what we saw is that in shallow soils, there was a greater proportion of trees with Caliciopsis, and also on dry soils compared to very dry and loamy. Probably because a lot of stands are on dry soils, so there's just greater amount of host density. And loamy stands with loamy soils that have greater water content had less disease. Also, the graphs on the right are showing the relationship of disease with like stalking. We grouped the stands by whether they were, we used a stalking chart developed by Leak. So stands, I think below the B line were understocked and above the B line were adequately stocked. And again, we saw that greater stalking resulted in greater disease, amount of proportion of trees with symptoms. We also did a study to look at kind of what the pathogen was doing to the trees. And you can section the trees and see where the cankers occurred, even though the tree might grow over them. So the picture on the right, you can see that maybe outside of the tree, there was just a little crack, but if you cut open, you know, and do a cookie, you can date when the damage occurred, you know, and when it started. And so Kara Constanza, who at the time was a graduate student at UMaine, she sectioned tons of trees, I think at least 30, and she did, you know, cookies at 1 foot sections and was able to count all the cankers on those sections. So the data, the graph on the left shows the number of cankers, you know, from 0 to 200. And then what this graph is showing is the impact that it had on the outward crown condition, expressed as the uncompacted live crown ratio. So that's a proportion of the stem occupied by the crown. And basically what she's showing is that greater amount of cankers resulted in worse crown conditions. And then she used these cookies to do dendrochronology. So she measured the area, you know, of the rings. That's shown here on this is like a graph of the dendrochronology, which started for the trees in 1945 up to the end of the study. And then on the right is the number of cankers. And it's kind of a complicated graph. But what I want you to, the red bars are the number of cankers. And you can see that before the 1990s, there was no Caliciopsis damage. And the gray bars represent traumatic events like droughts or hurricanes and so forth. And in the mid-1990s, there was some drought events, and that's after the drought is when you start seeing the number of cankers increase. So this is a native pathogen, and so host condition is really important. Trees that are drought stressed are more prone to disease, and so after droughts, we see greater amounts of cankers. Kara also looked at the impact of the canker on the wood product. So what she found is that trees that had cankers also had many other defects like black knots and red knots and so forth. And she looked at stands high and low here on this graph mean with a lot of disease and not as much as disease. But really all I want you to think about is this last column over here. And what she did is she worked with graders to grade the trees like at the site before they were harvested, and then they were taken to the mill, and the graders looked at the lumber after the trees were milled, and they graded it like pretending they didn't see any of the Caliciopsis defects and gave it, you know, a grade, and then graded it with the Caliciopsis defects. And what she found is that in stands that had a lot of symptoms, the total lumber, proportion of lumber with Caliciopsis was, you know, proportional lumber with Caliciopsis was 37%, but of that, only 10% had been downgraded because of Caliciopsis. So now I'm going to shift gears and talk about the foliar pathogens. This became an issue because every year the states and the Forest Service, we do aerial surveys to look at defoliation and mortality in the forest, and they map the defoliation and the mortality. And the aerial surveyors were seeing, it's kind of hard to see from the plane because the top of the trees are still green, but they were seeing yellowing like the pines at the edge of this field in Vermont, the bottom half of the crown was yellow. And then our state partners were getting, oh, and so this is a map from an aerial survey, and all the red patches are, areas where the aerial surveyors were able to identify yellowing trees. And it's problematic because aerial surveys, to map this, aerial surveys are not always conducted when the trees are symptomatic. And once the needles fall, it's really hard to see the symptoms. But our state partners were also getting a lot of calls from concerned homeowners who are seeing trees like these with browning symptoms. And again, the trees with the yellowing symptoms. So the tree in the middle is yellower compared to the other trees on the right and the left. This is a roadside tree. The needles would turn yellow at the end of June, and by 4th of July, they would fall off. And then folks that had properties by lakes, the trees were very obviously yellow because you can see them, at the side of the lake. And then there were needles everywhere in their driveways and so forth. Once the needles fall, the crowns of the trees look very defoliated, and white pines can hold, 3 or more years of needles, usually 3. And these trees that have been defoliated were only holding current year's needles. So, that was another way that trees were impacted. They just started looking very thin crowned. And so we collected needles from thousands of locations and looked at thousands of needles. And we found that there was 4 fungi that were typically found in these symptomatic trees. Bifusella linearis and Lophophisidium duxii these are again all native pathogens, are more frequently associated with the browning of younger trees, whereas this Lecanisticta isicola is the main culprit. It is the pathogen responsible for brown spot needle blight, which affects trees and nurseries, and in the southern US, it affects longleaf pine. And then we found this other fungus, Septorioides strobi, which is new to science and never been described, but we don't think it's exotic. So the yellowing of the needles and then the falling of the needles, we think it's mostly caused by Lecanisticta isicola. And this is a pathogen that doesn't have a sexual cycle. It just has a sexual state. That's important because it basically produces more spores. It doesn't need to find like a mate and to produce spores. It just itself produces a ton of spores. And rain, the spores are dispersed by rain and they land on the shoots that are developing. So shoots are produced this year will be infected, but it takes a year for them to become symptomatic. So that's why you see last year's needles are the ones with symptoms. And it's rain splash dispersed, so that's why the bottom of the crown is more affected, because the spores fall from the top to the bottom and nearby trees as well. And we establish permanent plots that we measure every year. We measure pairs of trees that are healthier, like the one on the right, and asymptomatic, like the one in the center of the picture. And we have a really simple rating. We just rate the proportion of the crown with symptoms. So if it's the bottom third, there's a rating of 1. If there's no disease, it has a 0. If it's a third to up to 2/3, gets a rating of 2. And if it's more than 2/3, a rating of 3. And a student Stephen Munck did this work. He's a student at UNH. When he did this, he looked at these ratings across all our plots on the y-axis, and he used mathematical equations to look at what factors might be involved in the increase in rating, in severity, disease severity. So what he found is that increase in summer precipitation, especially in June, and increase in spring precipitation were correlated with greater from the last year, because the needle, the candles get infected 1 year, and then they don't show symptoms until the following year. So last year's amount of rain in the spring and increase in winter temperature have been, as correlated with greater amounts of symptoms. And then we wanted to quantify the damage that was being caused to the trees, like what is actually happening with a tree. So Cameron McIntyre, another student at UNH, did this work, and he set out litter traps. So basically they're laundry baskets, and he collects the needles beginning in May. So like the bars, these are graphs for different locations. And, in the bottom, you can see the date where the needles were collected. And May would be kind of like the control or the normal amount of needles falling. And then June and July, you can see that there's a greater amount of needles that are falling. And then October is the normal time of the year when the most, for pines do lose their needles, but usually it's in October, this time of the year, they turn yellow and they fall. They shouldn't be losing their needles in June and July. And in some of these sites, the trees are losing more needles in June and July than October. So this means that, pines hold most of their starch that they reserves in their needles, unlike hardwoods, hardwoods reserve a lot of their starches in the roots, but pines do it in their needles. So they're losing starch reserves, and the trees are not able to reabsorb the nitrogen from the needles, throughout the growing season before they fall in October. So that results in a growth reduction of the tree. This is a core from Mohawk State Park. So the trees there are really as close as old growth as you can get. They're pretty old. They're about at least 200 years old. They're huge trees, and they were growing perfectly fine until 2009 when they were impacted by these foliar diseases. And you can see that there's been a big amount of growth reduction. And then this is showing the data from trees that were in our permanent plots that were not affected by the disease, the black circles, and the ones that had severe crown ratings, the white circles. And these trees that were severely impacted by the disease have, a reduction in growth. So enough gloom and doom. We wanted to provide management recommendations. We already knew the Caliciopsis was associated with greater stand density, and most of the spores for the pathogen that cause the foliar diseases, they're dispersed really close to the trees. So we thought that decreasing stand density in stands affected by foliar pathogens would create better conditions for residual trees who would have less competition with their neighbors, also open up the stand and change the environment in the stand, have more light and more air, drier conditions, and also increase the spacing between the trees so that inoculum from one tree can't get to the next one. And he did an experiment in 2 locations where he had blocks that he had control blocks. They weren't thin at all. These were all, pure white pine stands. And the controls had 180 feet square per acre. And then they did thinnings to load at least, 2 blocks of low density thinning of 60 feet square per acre, and then higher density of 100 feet square per acre. Oh, that's a picture of the logging. And this is a stocking chart from Leak. So the stands that were, initially before they were treated were in the red. They were above the unmanaged speed line. And then the blue would be the 100 feet square per acre, and the green would be below the sea line would be the 6 feet square per acre. And he looked at the crown condition. That's the graph on the right, disease severity. Again, in those thirds. So 0 would be no disease, and a 2 would be 1/3 to 2/3 of the crown was affected. And he looked at them before the treatments took place in 2015, and then a year after the treatment took place, and then 2 years. You can see that the low density thinning, the 60 feet square per acre, the disease severity dropped. So that was really good news. because it means that the trees were able to recover. And so basically the bottom line of all the pine work we've done is that we see more disease conditions and very overstocked stands that are not managed, like the stand on the top left, where it looks like it's an old field, and the trees, you know, were not, or it's got higher stocking and therefore less light. And if you open up the stand in these, especially in stands that have very poor soils, like shallow soils, the disease conditions should be ameliorated or improved. Right. And we worked with several folks from the state agencies and Bill Livingston from UMaine to create this field manual for managing eastern white pine. So everything I talked about, the symptoms and signs for the diseases and the management recommendations are in this field manual, which is free. It's online. You can look it up. And then there's some other resources which are also available online and anyone can download them. All right. And these are all the folks that all the graduate students I mentioned that did the work. Now Cameron works in our office, so he's my colleague. And Kara also works for the Forest Service, but she's in St. Paul. So now I'm gonna switch gears to hemlock silviculture. And we've done work looking at region that's affected by hemlock woolly adelgid, elongate hemlock scale, and Serococcus shoot blight, which is a pathogen. And we want, just like the work that we did with the white pine, where we were looking at silvicultural treatments for white pine, we want to do something similar for hemlock, because it turns out that UV light is bad for the hemlock woolly adelgid, and also that healthier trees are better able to withstand these pests. So we want to look at white pine regeneration in stands that have been treated, you know, for different thinning or silvicultural treatments like small gaps, shelter woods, and untreated control. However, we don't have any data yet because we're doing this work at the Massabesic experimental forest, and it's taken us forever to try to get the sale in place and all the EPA stuff and so forth. But I think it's going to happen. The treatments, the silvicultural treatments and the sale will go through this winter. So hopefully I'll have information about that soon. But work from the south indicates that, you know, that is true, that trees that are affected by these pests, if you release them, they do much better and can recover. And then the last thing I wanted to talk to you about is what we're trying to do about introduced pests in Northeast. Our biggest issue in forest health are all these introduced insects and diseases. They come in live plant trade and packaging materials. You know, some examples are butternut canker, white pine blister rust, which I mentioned is chestnut blight, Dutch elm disease. And the Forest Service is not a regulatory agency, so we can't, you know, make plant regulations or anything like that, but we try to provide technical advice and work with partners to come up, hopefully, with solutions. So some of the things we're doing is, Chris mentioned the Sentinel Gardens. These are kind of the canary in the coal mine. We're trying to get ahead of the pests. So we're trying to plant like North American tree species in China and Europe, where our exotic insects the invaders are located. So try to get our plant species over there to see what pests that they have that might be problematic. And we have a system of reciprocal Sentinel Gardens that we have partners. Well, in Europe, here's the map. We have partners in Europe and China. So these are all the plots that we have. There's one in Portsmouth and one in Ohio and one in Italy and one in Finland and two in China, and they're kind of along the same latitude. So in North America, we're planting European and Chinese species. And in China, they're planting North American and European species. And in Europe, they're planting North American and Chinese species. So that's why they're reciprocal plantings. And we scout these plants. These are trees that are ecologically important in those countries and are also commercially available. We're not bringing in trees from abroad. They're from local nurseries. We scout these trees throughout the growing season and extract the DNA from plants with symptoms and get the fungi. And a lot of the problems we have with regulating plant pathogens is that some of these fungi have really cryptic life cycles, and they might be inside a pine leaf, but actually cause the lethal disease of butternut. So we're trying to create a baseline data showing, all the pests, all the fungi and insect pests that occur in these plants to have a better database. We also work with domestic arboreta, and because the sentinel gardens have smaller trees and younger trees. Arboreta have older trees. The problem with arboreta is that they spray their trees with a lot of chemicals. So the sentinel gardens are not sprayed for anything. And then we also work with the Botanical Garden Conservation International. They're an international groups that works with botanical gardens and arboreta from throughout the world. And what we do with them is we train the staff, the foresters that take care of those gardens, to look for insects and pests on North American trees planted abroad. So I already talked about that. Okay. Yeah, so this is a picture of the Sentinel Garden here in Portsmouth, and the top picture was taken the year the garden was first planted in 2020, and the plants were pretty small. And then the bottom picture was from last year. The plants on the right are European species, and the plants on the left are Chinese. And you can see how huge they are. The Chinese plants grew like they're almost like invasive. So we actually found that one of them should be probably listed as an invasive. And if you want to learn more about the project, there's this feature article that was recently put together. It's on the Forest Service website, and there's the link below. The Sentinel Garden in Ohio, they used a drone to fly over it. So the video in there is footage from that drone. And that's my contact information. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to take your questions now.
We do have a few questions
I'll stop sharing.
that have come in.
Okay.
So I don't know if I can read those to you from the
Okay.
Q&A panel, or.
It says, I have been working in the Appalachians and have found needlecast blight to be moving through the woods very quickly, especially in West Virginia, where white pine mortality is severe. Yes, we work with, so like West Virginia and Pennsylvania are outside of the footprint or office covers, but we have counterparts there. And we definitely work a lot with the folks from Pennsylvania, the state agency, because they're also seeing the same things with the needle blights. And in the South, they're having a lot of problems with Lecanosticta isicola. Not really on white pine, for them it's not commercially important, but on longleaf pine. And then there's a comment, trees die in 3 years. We haven't seen any of the trees in our plots die. The trees that we've seen die had foliar diseases and like root rot or some other issue. So trees that already were impaired, like were pushed over the edge. But this last year, I've been seeing a lot of gnarly looking pines. I think the drought has been, not great.
And then if you one of them was mistakenly put in the answered section. So if you go there, there's a couple of questions there.
All right, yeah. Okay. So it has become much more in winter West Virginia over the past 20 years and has rising summer dew points being specifically considered. We did look at not dew points. That's really hard to measure. Like that exceeds the capability that we have, but we did look at relative humidity, and I can't remember, but I think the major thing that we found was the rain in June.
Okay, there's a
Okay.
follow-up there below that.
Are these foliar diseases primary or secondary infestations, and what pushes the pines over edge that kills them? This primary and secondary thing is hard. I think people like to use those concepts because it makes things easier to understand, but in reality, everything's happening at once. The trees that I've seen that are dead that also have foliar diseases had root rot, and then like turpentine beetle. Is planting western hemlock a viable option to reestablish hemlock in critical areas? I think that we should be treating our current species, like every time we move livestock around, like living, like not livestock, but living plants, you're introducing, it's creating an opportunity to introduce something else. So I'm really hoping that silviculture will be of current stance will be will lead to some good results.
And there's one more question that got tucked away. It says, in recent years, commercial production of currants has started in Connecticut. Is the risk of white pine blister much greater by having commercial production of currants in the area?
Yes. And I worked on that too. I just didn't include it in this presentation, but we looked, New Hampshire, there's permitting for, if you want to grow currants in New Hampshire, you need a permit. So we knew where all the currants were planted in New Hampshire, and you're only supposed to plant things that are resistant, including the currants that they're growing in Connecticut. Some of them are claim they're resistant to white pine blister rust, but they're European black currants, and they only have one gene resistance, and that is easily overcome by the pathogen, and those plants get hammered by blister rust. Can you repeat what you said about HWA and UV light? So UV light is bad for hemlock woolly adelgid and elongate hemlock scale. If you have, they've done experiments where they have branches that are infested and they're exposed to UV light, and that's bad for the insects. So we're hoping that with these openings, there's at the Massabesic, we have good eastern white pine hemlock region, and we're hoping that by releasing that regeneration, by creating small gaps around the hemlock region, the impact of hemlock woolly adelgid will be reduced.
And you had mentioned that your research is underway, and is there a timeline for when you might be able to release data from that? Or
Sure, we did all the pre-treatment measurements 2 years ago, and we're hoping that the sale will go through this winter. So whenever you do any kind of sale on public lands, like for federal lands, it's really complicated. So hopefully all the paperwork will be done and we can do the sale this winter. So then we would have, in 2 years, we'll have post treatment data, but really it'll be after 5 years that we'll have better results, because it takes time for the trees to get accustomed to the new growing conditions.
I say.
But that's what we're doing here. I know in the South they've been doing, I can look up work from other people in the South. They've been doing something a little different. They actually have mature trees that they release, so they cut around the mature tree, and they've been finding that has also worked. We're luckier in a sense in the North because our colder winter temperatures bring down the hemlock woolly adelgid populations. Are the white pine problems more cyclical? So I haven't seen them go away. Like the permanent plots we have, we measure every year. We've been doing that since 2011, so 11 years. And the trees that are infested are, every year they're the same ones. So there is a little bit of variation in how badly their crowns look. And I think that's related, that's related to last year's rain. But
Great.
then again, the trees that were thinned, they did look better after the thinning. So I should state that in our permanent plots, we're not doing any treatments. We're just, the trees are like they were from the beginning.
Anyone else with some last minute questions for Dr. Munck? Well,
Yeah,
great.
and if you have hemlock stands you want to harvest, and I can, we'd be happy to work with you to see. We have to do our work on federal land, and it's really hard to do any kind of management.
So there's an opportunity for people to partner with you.
If they want to, yeah,
Okay.
we'd be happy to work with.
Very interesting. Well, thank you very much. We really appreciate your time today. And
Thank you, and thank you for the great questions. I hope you have a great rest of your meeting and enjoy this lovely day.
all right. Thank you very much. And we're going to move on. And the next item on our agenda is the presentation of the Howard F. Mason Forester of the Year Award. And once again, to present that, Bill Hull.
Good morning again. It's my pleasure this morning to present Michael Bartlett with the Howard F. Mason Forest of the Year Award. Howard liked to describe himself as a dirt forester, meaning one who worked on the land. Mike Bartlett certainly fits that description, having now been a forester with Hull Forest Products for 44 years and counting. Mike grew up in the Potsdam, New York area and graduated from Paul Smith's College in 1976. He took a short course on lumber grading at the University of Vermont. Upon graduation, he started work at a sawmill in upstate New York. Responding to an ad for a forester and with the appointment made, Mike showed up at our sawmill office in March of 1978. I will never forget that day, as it was a cold, blustery day on what we sometimes call Sawmill Hill. I stepped out of the office to meet Mike with my coat on. Mike wore nothing but a heavy shirt, and I was immediately impressed. Sunny southern New England was a tremendous change, temperature-wise, from upstate New York. Mike spent his early years at Hull Forest Products in the sawmill, where he graded lumber and became a sawyer. In 1980, he transferred to the forestry department as a procurement forester. Along the way in his career, Mike met Kathy, got married, bought a camp property from the company that he rebuilt into the only home on Griggs Pond in Woodstock, Connecticut. Mike now has 2 grown children, 1 grandchild, and a second due in just a few months. Mike is currently a licensed forester in Massachusetts and Connecticut and has attended the SAF National Leadership Academy. He has been a Society of American Foresters member for 39 years. Mike has served on the Mass Association of Professional Foresters Membership Committee, the Mass Tree Farm Committee, has done many shifts on the tree farm display at the Big E, and for many years collaborated with John Scanlon of Mass DFW at the forestry exhibit at the Big Mo Outdoor Expo in Sturbridge, Mass. Mike's education has never stopped. While working as a forester, writing management plans and harvest plans, he also worked part-time early on as a chopper and skidder operator for several different loggers to better gain a valuable insight of the forester's role through the eyes of a logger. Mike also has a business hobby as a taxidermist, which fits well with his passion for deer hunting. Mike has been a speaker at the Northern Logger and Expo Mass in Springfield, Mass, an active participant in school speaking opportunities, as well as helping to host an ongoing annual summer seminar series at Hull Forest Products for Yale Forestry School graduate students. Mike has also been actively involved with the Last Green Valley, hosting Walktober tours at various Hull properties, including Steerage Rock Forest in Brimfield, Mass, where this award picture was taken. Today, Mike is the chief forester at Hull Forest Products, with oversight of thousands of acres of company lands in central Mass and Connecticut. Over his career, he has developed a large landowner client list, many of whom he has harvested on multiple times over the past 44 years. Mike has been highly successful in helping landowners recognize their individual goals for their woodlands. Equally as important, Mike has always been one to participate in forestry organizations working to promote forest management through science, education, training, and politics. Congratulations, Mike, on an award well-deserved, and which would make Howard Mason, as well as myself, proud of all your achievements. Thank you.
I'd like to start off by thanking Bill Hull for nominating me for this award. I'd like to thank the Massachusetts Forestry Association for this award. It is greatly appreciated. I find it special because Howard certainly had an influence in the way I perform my job and my efforts to inform and educate others of what forestry is and how it is practiced. Howard spent much of his career as quoted industrial forester working for Peck Lumber. I could see early on in my career how highly respected Howard was in the foresters community, despite being an industrial forester. And that certainly had an impact on how I perform my job. I feel fortunate to have landed at Hull Forest Products in 1978 and have had the opportunity to work for a sawmill owner that is a forester as well. I've had the opportunity to reach hundreds and hundreds of people, from scout groups, youngsters with their parents on walks, to seniors in later life learning classes with sustainable forestry information and insights. It has been helpful that my employer understands how important public outreach and education is in maintaining our social license to practice forestry. I'd like to close by sharing an interaction that I had with Howard. I had stopped by Howard's house at some point after Bill had purchased many of the Peck properties. Howard's house was sided with weathered pine boards. There was no evidence of stain, paint, or any type of preservative on the siding. So I asked Howard why there was no protection on his siding. Howard's response was, well, I once read a Forest Service publication that said 1-inch white pine siding would last 100 years without any preservative, and I figured that'd be long enough for me. So once again, thank you very much, the Massachusetts Forestry Association, and for the recognition in this award.
Thank you very much, Mike, and congratulations. Really well-deserved award of your incredible 40+ year career at Hull Forest Products. Really amazing. So congratulations again.
Thank you.
Okay. We mentioned at the beginning of the meeting our sponsors. So we heard from Farm Credit East earlier, and now it's time to hear from our sponsor at Berry Equipment. So Mike Conway, an MFA board member at Berry. If you're ready, we're a little bit ahead of schedule, but if you can go ahead and I can turn things over to you.
Good morning. I'd like to thank you and the board for letting us sponsor this meeting. I'm here today with Jake Burrell, the general manager of Berry Equipment. And first off, we'd like to congratulate the Brightman family on winning the Doug Cook Award, and also Mike for being Forester of the Year. From there, I'll turn it over to Jake for a few minutes and let him talk about Berry Equipment.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for having us. We sincerely appreciate it. And this is a brief overview of Berry Equipment and what we bring to the marketplace to support both you and our clients overall. So we consider ourselves the experts in the heavy forestry equipment. We've been operating since 1985. We've been providing tree service professionals across New England with heavy construction and forestry equipment, parts and in-house or on-site service. We've been the Doosan Dealer of the Year 5 years in running. Most recently last year, the top performing dealer in North America and Eurasia. Our forestry lineup includes both or all of Doosan, Aztec, which is probably more commonly known as Peterson, Rhodobec, Fecon, Indeco, and much, much more. We have a powerful forestry lineup. Barry Equipment offers Doosan line of excavators as well as Yanmar and Rhodobec log loaders. One of our specialties are Rhodobec grapple and saws, the combo attachment, knuckle boom long motors, storm trucks, naturally the Peterson Pacific horizontal grinders, chippers, and blower trucks. And we have a variety of compact equipment that seems to be more germane into the marketplace as we continue to grow. Currently, we have 3 locations across New England. We have 2 here in Webster, which we offer a full parts service sales support. Our main corporate office in Birch Island in Webster is a 16,000 square foot facility. We have 4 service bays, 1 5-ton crane and 1 7-ton overhead crane as well, coupled with 7 on the road service trucks. Our second location opened just a little bit over a year ago now. It's a 17,500 square foot facility. It's a full service offering. We have 5 bays and 2 10-ton cranes to support your needs. Recently, we've also acquired a piece of property up in Maine. We've recently cleared the lot and preparing to break ground here come early spring. So that'll be number 4 for us. Our third location, which recently opened, is in South Windsor, Connecticut. It's a full service distribution center. It's a 5,000 square foot building, and currently, as we speak, we have a 10,000 square foot addition being put up with 2 service bays and an additional 10-ton crane to service your needs.
In addition, we're building an awful lot of storm trucks. We're Peterson's largest dealer in North America, like Jake had mentioned before. We started building these storm trucks back a few years ago. We're putting a branded bodies on them. We've had tremendous luck with them, and as quick as we get them in, they go out the door. And if anybody has any question with that, we'll be more than happy to answer questions after.
Service that won't quit. Barry Equipment is predicated in the sales on customer service and after sales support. And as we continue to grow, we're certainly not losing fact of that mantra, so to speak. We offer full service and on-site repair capabilities. Naturally, we boast an impressive fleet of field service trucks, certainly keeping up to date to be able to adhere to the current conditions that are out there in the marketplace. Our service technicians are all fully certified from the factory in every product line that we offer. And our crew, again, remains committed to keeping your fleet up and running with superior customer support to mitigate downtime and promote uptime to keep us all rolling. Kind of a mantra of ours is the success of our business determines the success of yours. Our team remains committing to leading the way by providing exceptional customer service and long-lasting customer satisfaction.
That's about it. If anybody has any questions on it, we'd be more than happy to answer. You could reach out to me or to Jake at any point also. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thanks so much. Really appreciate Barry's support of this meeting and in general. Certainly some really interesting custom-made equipment there, and on-site service is certainly something that's can be really appealing. You know, the service truck will come to you where you are. That's really valuable. So thanks so much, Mike, and all at Barry Equipment. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, up next is our business meeting. This is sort of the a little bit driest part of the meeting, but don't worry, we've got some really great stuff coming up, so hang with us. We're going to do 3 quick things at the business meeting, which is number 1, approve the minutes from the last meeting. And again, you know, you were given a link to the program book an hour earlier today before the meeting started, and I put the link in the chat if you haven't looked at it, so you can see the minutes of the previous meeting. Last year was sort of a larger business meeting because we did amend our bylaws to bring them into the modern era. So what we need to do is approve those minutes, which are in the program book. And we're going to also use this as a quorum call. So the way we're going to do this is with a virtual poll. So I'm going to launch this poll, and you should see it on your screen to vote to approve last year's meeting, which are in the program book again. So please take a minute and vote here. Like for you to do that, and then make sure that and I can go through and make sure I put that link in the chat again if you haven't seen it. Let me try that again. While everyone's voting, please continue to vote. Hopefully you can see the link that I just put in the chat. If you can't see that, let me know. Okay, we going to end this poll as people have voted. We do have a quorum, and the votes have been approved. So thank you very much for doing that. Next up is just a quick financial report. So again, in the program book, and hopefully you can see that link if you haven't already. You can download it and just take a look at our finances. Essentially, we still had a somewhat tough year last year, but we did narrow our losses compared to previous years. The pandemic's been hard with some of our in-person events not being around. The good news is we're looking at a brighter future. So we've received a couple of grants totaling around $50,000 to put on programs this year. So that will certainly help. We've got the first of those programs happening in a couple of weeks. It's a workshop on Avenza maps and the mapping that program that can be used by foresters and loggers and forest landowners. Foresters can draw a map, they can send it, and other people can open it in Avenza and they can see where they are on the property. A harvest map can be exported. So there's some interesting stuff there. It's going to be on November 14th, and it's going to, November 15th, Tuesday, and it's from 9 to 2:30. Fair number of continuing education credits available for that. There's a small cost, but lunch is provided, and you also get a significant discount on the pro version of Avenza Map. So hopefully we'll get some folks interested in that. We've already had a number of registrations. So we're hopeful that the coming year will be a good one for us, but you can take a more detailed, closer look at our finances if you like. And then the final thing we need to do as part of the business meeting is elect new board members. And I'll bring up the list here. So we currently have 14 board members, and we're allowed to have 15. So we have one vacancy. And then of the board members whose terms are expiring, Skip Leclerc has decided to step down. So we really want to thank Skip for his service over the many years on the MFA board. Skip has been a great resource for me personally, able to ask him questions, and he's pointed us in the right direction on more than one occasion. So I'm really grateful to Skip and everything he's done for MFA. But that leaves us with two vacancies that we need to fill. And the board has decided to fill them with a couple of new folks. Kate Lindros Conlin is a member of the board of the Mohawk Trail Woodlands Partnership, which is now the Woodlands Partnership of Northwest Massachusetts. She's been an advocate for forest stewardship. She's known for writing opinion pieces and in articles across Massachusetts. So we're glad to have Kate join our board and bring her perspective. And then our other new board member is Dr. Jonathan Parrott. John's a farmer and a forester and a wood energy expert, and certainly an advocate for modern wood heat throughout the Commonwealth and other ways for forest and bio-based energy. So we're glad to have John's expertise on regulatory and other issues. So we're welcoming him to the board. And then finally, we have 4 existing board members who are running for re-election: Jamie Damon, our treasurer; Fred Hayes, our secretary; and then Phil Benjamin, who's a consulting forester; and Mike Conway from Berry Equipment, who you just met. So again, we need to vote to approve these new members, and I will launch a poll to do that. So once again, I'd like to ask you to take a minute and just vote to approve these new board members. We've been making an effort to get some new blood on the board and some younger folks. And so over the last, between this year and last year, we've added about 40% new board members and younger folks. We think that that really makes a difference. So thank you for voting. Those board members are now voted in and their term starts immediately. So welcome on board, Kate and John, and thanks to those who have run for re-election. We're running a little bit early, but our next presentation is going to be from Stephen Denette of Acorn, Arabella. And actually what we're going to do first before we get to Steve is show a video. So if you're not familiar with this project, Steve decided that he was going to build a wooden sailboat. He had never sailed before, never built a boat before, but it was something he was determined to do. The finances of that could be a little challenging. So one of the things that's the way Steve made it work was by actually harvesting the lumber from his family's 50 acres of forest land in Granby, Massachusetts. And actually, so he did all the harvesting and the milling himself for the boat. And so the boat is well underway, and it's gotten tremendous attention. He has a YouTube channel. It's gotten tens of millions of views. He's been on the front page of the Boston Globe. He's been featured on Chronicle. He was just recently featured on the Sunday version of the Today Show. So there's a lot of people learning more about local forest products in Massachusetts than ever before. And we're really happy for that. So what I'm going to do is share a video, a piece of their 200th episode, which sort of gives you an overview of what the organization is all about, and sort of looks at the early days of the project and some of the harvesting of trees and the milling of the lumber. So now we had an issue last year when we tried to share video. So I'm hoping that this works all right. Please tell me if it does not. I'm gonna make sure I check all the right buttons here, and we'll try to share this. And let's see. So let me know if there's a problem and you can't see this.
So why would someone with a full-time job, salaried, benefited, 401k, paid vacations, like we came and went pretty much as I pleased. I was the head route setter for a pretty big climbing gym, master's degree in education, taught for a number of years. Why would I cash in my 401k, quit my job, and put it all out on the line to build a big wooden boat? You know, the real beginning of that was when I was a little kid and we would vacation up in Maine, and I would see these wooden boats sail by, and I thought it was amazing that, you know, those boats could then theoretically go anywhere in the world that they wanted to go that was blue, and I thought that was pretty neat. And I also had an appreciation that somebody cut down the trees and milled the lumber and had the time and the skills to build a vessel like this and have it be curved and watertight when the wood swells. And I always thought that was really fascinating as a kid. And I think it planted a bit of a seed in my brain that, you know, someday it would be really cool to cut down some trees and mill lumber and build a boat. But it was never more than that. Like, someday it could be cool to live on Mars, you know. It was just really, really out there. And then in fast forward 2011, I was out on vacation in Cape Cod. We had a rainy day. I went to a used bookstore and picked up a book, 50 Wooden Boat Plans. So it was really nice to find this boat building and to dive more into the technical side of it and read and research on nights and weekends and have something to kind of chew on during the day and think about and figure out. And I just kept chewing on it. And then it was 2015 and I turned 30 years old, and I sat down and really thought about, you know, what I was doing with my life and if I was on track to do what I wanted to do. And I've always wanted to travel and explore. I've always been hungry for the unknown. And I realized that, you know, I wasn't really on that track. I had the same job for 6 years and progressed about as high as I was going to in that. And I decided that it wasn't a someday, that it was a now. And that is when I also found YouTube and people sailing their fiberglass yachts around the world, namely Delos and the Vagabond, who are kind of the OGs of that. And I realized what Patreon was and merchandise sales and how they were sharing their lives and their experiences and what they were doing. And people were helping to contribute and make those videos and keep that coming. And I thought, you know, maybe people would be willing to follow the journey of building a boat and then going and voyaging on it. And I asked Alex if he thought he could make some videos and would be interested in that. And he said that he was, and at that point it was game on, and I haven't stopped since. So there's the lumber to build the boat, and then there's the lumber to build the infrastructure to build the boat. So we have the boathouse, we've got the shed that houses the thickness planer, we've got all of the lumber here that we need. But there's the molds that we had to make, the lofting floor, tons of bracing and patterns and staging. There's the second floor in the boathouse. And when you're buying lumber, you can specify that you want nice clear boards. And when you get 1,000 board feet of lumber, it's 1,000 usable board feet of lumber. When you're cutting down trees and milling like we are, you get all of the great lumber and you get all of the junk lumber. So we really had to mill 3 or 4 times what you would think you would need, just because a lot of it ends up being unusable for knots and defects and that kind of thing. So we had to do a lot of milling, and this was a gigantic pile of lumber at one point that was all oak, and now all that oak is inside the boat and fastened to Arabella or up the smoke because it heated the house or the steam box. We knew that building the boat, especially while making videos, was going to take a significant amount of time, and it was absolutely going to take years. And from the get-go, we told people 2 to 10, and we are still on track to come in under 10. So we are on time. The joys of having a big time window. But we knew that having the structure to protect the boat and the equipment and to be able to work in the inclement weather, which we have quite frequently here in New England, we decided that, you know, the building was paramount. And I did a lot of planning with how the boat and everything would fit in here. And I don't know if you remember, but none of this second floor was here. This whole structure was completely open, and we had a huge lofting floor here that went from the wall basically right up to where the boat is now. And that is where we drew the boat out full size, and was really the first process of actual boat building, was the lofting of the boat. And that let us pick up the shape for our ballast keel and the center line structure and all of the molds, and got us on our way towards actually building a boat. I asked how many of you remember the lofting floor, and I'm sure all of you remember this one, and this is where we poured the ballast keel. And if you want to go from not many YouTube subscribers to quite a few YouTube subscribers, apparently pouring a big ballast keel is a good way to do it. So we poured the ballast keel, and that video went bonkers on YouTube. There's an incredible amount of comments. People had a lot of things to say. But that's what really launched the channel, and with that we got enough viewers and we got enough patrons. Thank you again, patrons. That Alex was able to quit his job at the coffee shop and was able to be compensated through Acorn to Arabella for his time video editing and working behind the scenes on the camera work and the computer side of things. And it was going to take a little bit longer and a little more growth and actually another employee before I was able to quit my jobs and come work for Acorn to Arabella full time. But we did get there, and it was about a year after Alex. The project progressed and the support grew pretty quickly, with Alex being full-time and us getting the keel pour done, putting the backbone assembly up, and standing up the molds. And it was about that time we realized that we drastically underestimated the amount of wood that we were going to need for this endeavor. And if you look around, there's a lot of wood. Everything is wood. So we did another really big round of logging. nothing like strapping a $500 camera to the top of a tree and keeping the fingers crossed. And at that point, I had just managed to quit my full-time job and pick up a part-time job doing tree work. So that got us a couple extra logs from the tree jobs, and it gave me some more flexibility to handle that next round of sawmilling. And when we were getting ready to do that round, we knew that we needed to find some wood for the mast. And we asked the family if we were able and willing to cut down one of my great-grandfather's trees that he planted in the front yard to use as the mast. And we asked Mom, and she said yes. And we asked Grandpa, and he says, you got to ask Grandma. And we asked Grandma, and she said, you know, he would not be happy about his tree being cut down, but he would be happy about his tree being cut down for this purpose. So we borrowed Tom's tree equipment. It was great that I was working with them at the time, and climbed that spruce tree and cut the top off and dropped that and milled it up when we had the sawmill, and that's ready to become Arabella's mainmast. So thank you, great grandpa. You had no idea when you were a little kid and you planted that tree that's what would happen with it, but I'm thankful you planted it. And this is where the tree stood. It was taller than these ones around it. And we threaded the needle between the spruce trees and the crabapple tree there. And that's where I ended up dropping the trunk.
Okay, we unfortunately can't show you everything from the channel, but that is a little taste of the 200th episode. So we encourage everyone to go to the YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/Acorn to Arabella. You can see all the videos from the start of the project up to the current time, with new videos dropping each Friday. So I'm hoping that that Steve from Acorn Arabella is with us. Great, there you are, Steve. If folks have questions for Steve, you can enter them into the Q&A box. And Steve, I'm not sure if there's something you want to say generally about the project as people entered in some questions.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I want to say thanks for having me. It was really cool to receive the email that you guys were offering us the forestry award. So it's a huge honor. I never imagined that would be transpiring. Yeah, doing the project and building the boat, it's been a really amazing experience, and just met so many phenomenal people, and can actually see where she stands right behind me there. And having the family with the property and the timber and the forests around here is really what made it possible. If I had to go buy, you know, mahogany and teak, or even if we bought white oak and white pine, it would just be way too cost prohibitive. So thankfully that my family had the property and has managed it for timber. When I grew up, you know, my great grandfather was always chastising us about not putting any hardware into trees. And you know, we milled up that spruce tree that stood in the front yard for almost 100 years, and we did not find a single nail in it. So that's the kind of ethos that I was brought up with, and it's led to a healthy forest, and it really made all of this possible. Without the trees, without the timber, without the local arborists and landowners who've chipped in and donated trees here and there, it really wouldn't have been possible. So does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, folks, if you have questions, please enter them in. Just a couple of questions while we're getting some more in. How's the progress coming? Like, what are your plans, and how close are you to finishing the boat?
We're getting there. So we're going to launch in June 17th at Mystic Seaport in Connecticut. And right now we are racing winter to try to get everything done that needs to be painted and fiberglassed on the deck. So the hatches, the house sides, the house top, we're strip building those out of cedar and fiberglassing them. And then the main mast, which we just saw, we're working on now and getting that scarfed up and glued up to be a little bit of a hollow down the center so that we can run all the electrical lines through it. And those are the things that we're working on right now because they're really temperature sensitive. And then once we get those done, it'll be into electrical and interior work, getting the diesel heater hooked up so that we actually have a somewhat warm winter inside the boat this year, which should be a first. And then in the spring, it'll be fairing and caulking and painting, taking all of this down and trucking her to the coast.
Great. And in terms of like the local use of wood, how did you, I mean, are there certain species of wood which are better for other things on the boat, or how did you select which trees you were going to use?
Yeah, for sure. So most of the boat is built out of white oak, which is not ring porous. So that's what makes white oak particularly good boat wood as opposed to, say, red oak. And white oak also steam bends really well. So the keel timber, the stem and stern posts, the steam bent frames, most of the lower planking, that's all white oak. We use some white cedar for some of the planks in the housetop, and that's because it's rot resistant and lightweight, but it's not as durable as the oak. So since this is hopefully an expedition boat, we plan to go to some pretty wild places, having that bit heavier but much tougher oak planking make a big difference. And then the deck is white pine, and which is very traditional for boat decks in New England. All the old fishing schooners and everything, they all have white pine decks. And I also used a bunch of black locust. So the shear strakes, the covering boards, the deck beams, basically anywhere where we wanted something as tough and durable and rot resistant as humanly possible and still obtainable in the Northeast, we used black locust. So those were our main timbers. So most of the white oak came from right here on the property. We purchased the keel timber from Duke at New England Naval Timbers in northwestern Connecticut, and he got the logs from a property in upstate New York. So the keel timber is the only piece of wood for the boat that I've bought. And that's simply because we didn't have a white oak big enough. Most of the planking, the frames, that all came from the property here. We got one white oak log that was a beetle kill in Belchertown. It was like a few miles down the road, but the lion's share of it was from right here.
There's a question about where you plan to go with the boat.
So the plan to travel is, I've got objectives all over the world, but most of them are in farther northern and southern latitudes. So I mountain bike, I rock climb, I backcountry ski. I'm pretty crabby when the weather gets over 80 degrees Fahrenheit. So places like Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, Baffin Island, Greenland, Norway, Patagonia, Japan, those all hold great appeals. I wouldn't be surprised if at some point I sail around the world, but I think it's going to be kind of a path that looks like this. No intent to head to the Southern Ocean and just loop around and make a quick thing of it. The idea is to go stay places for months or possibly years and explore and adventure, and when we're ready for a new location to move on.
Great. There's a question here. Have you heard back that your project has inspired others to use local wood for good purposes or plant trees or other things related to that?
Yeah, a little bit. We've had some few people who have asked about our process for sourcing the timber. Heard more about people taking on building projects and that kind of thing. One of the fun things we've done though is usually a couple times a year we offer up the offcut pile to folks. So things that are too small for Arabella are great sized for smaller boats. So I know that out of our waste, quite a few other small boats have been built, which is pretty cool.
And there's a question about, you're obviously using second growth timber. Any comments about that versus the strength of that versus old growth timber that was used for boats in the old days? Not sure how much of an expert you are on that.
I know a little bit. So part of it depends on the species. White oak second growth is actually better than white oak old growth because the winter rings are a lot weaker than the summer. So you actually get better bending stock and a less brittle wood when the oak is faster grown, which when I learned that, I was really, really surprised. So apparently when Europeans first showed up here and found all of these gigantic old growth oaks, they didn't really like them for boat building. And it wasn't until the second round came in and things grew faster and had more summer wood that they actually started using it more for boats and found it better. Now the opposite is true for like the cedar. We had a lot of issues with the cedar planking because it was knotty and it was brittle and it had wide growth rings, and that would have benefited from being old growth and being really slow grown, which was part of the reason we switched and did the oak planking. Black locust, I don't really think it matters. I mean, that stuff is for succession and grows so fast anyways and is a nitrogen fixer. So I don't really know if old growth or new growth locust would make much of a difference because they wouldn't be growing up much in a stand anyways. And then the pine, thankfully, it's not old growth, but it's forest grown. So the deck is all quarter sawn, which is really important for the deck. And it's really tight growth rings because they grew up in a nice thick stand over the years. And it wasn't like southern pine. Pine in boat building nowadays is a really bad reputation because of how fast a lot of the pine is grown, and it's not nearly as durable. And there's a lot of sapwood. So if you can get slow grown, fairly tight ringed pine and you avoid the sapwood and any blue streak or grayscale, you can still get a really nice deck out of it. So between old and new growth, it's kind of a mixed bag.
Okay. And one of the things that struck me with this whole project is that you don't actually know how to sail. So how do you know that you'll enjoy it, or how do you know that that will be something that you'll love to do?
Very fair question. I've spent a lot of time on the water, so I haven't sailed, but I've done a bit of offshore fishing and I've done a whole lot of expedition sea kayaking. So I've been 5 miles offshore in a sea kayak and have been out on the ocean living out of a sea kayak for weeks at a time and find that quite enjoyable. And this thing's glamping compared to that. I mean, it's so much more room than a kayak, and it's got a motor. And honestly, if I get on the water and I really dislike sailing, I don't think I'll regret anything. I mean, big part of this was the challenge and the experience of building the boat. And I've learned so much and have grown as a woodworker and as a human being, and have met such amazing people throughout the process that if for some reason I really hated sailing and didn't want to live on the boat, I don't think I would regret it one bit. But I don't really see that happening.
And this project has gotten enormous attention, front page of the Globe, and you were just on the Today Show. And what's that? Does that surprise you that it's been so successful at attracting attention? And what's that been like for you personally?
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey. It's very bizarre for me to be recognized places. So I was up in Camden, Maine about a month ago, out for breakfast with my girlfriend, and guy was kind of looking at me a little funny, and then came over and said that he follows the channel and is a big fan. And so that's weird. I don't think I'll ever really get used to that. I never got into this with the intention of the fanfare. I always got into the YouTube side of it as a way to fund making, building the boat and making that dream possible with time and money. So the kind of fandom that comes with it doesn't really, I don't particularly enjoy it. But it is also at the same time amazing to hear from people that have been inspired to go do something or find some joy or solace or comfort in watching the weekly videos. And that is really amazing. I love it when people come up and say, I followed you and it inspired me to do blah. And I love that. And I think of that as like a tiny little ripple in the world, and that somebody watches us build the boat and says, you know what, I can hang my kitchen cabinets, and they hang their kitchen cabinets. And then their friend says, man, you have such nice kitchen cabinets. How'd you do that? I did it myself. Maybe I can fix my sink. And I hope that just ripples and gets more people to go do more things. Because honestly, I think most humans are capable of a lot more than they give themselves credit for.
And what are your future plans for the channel? Once the boat is finished, and do you plan to continue the channel and document your adventures, or how will that work?
Yeah, that's the tentative plan. So we will absolutely for sure chronicle the first year or so on the water, and me learning to sail, and what worked and didn't work, and what we have to fix and what broke, and all that fun stuff. And then after that, I don't know, we'll see. For me, the building of Arabella and the channel was always to get on the water and show that journey. And if people are interested in following us in the boat as we continue to voyage and travel and explore, then great. And if that ends up not being the case, or we decide that it's too much work and we want to go back to being a little less known, then maybe we'll move on to something else. But absolutely for sure, the first year will get covered, and then after that, we'll see. I hope to.
And it's a really cool project, and if people want to get involved and support it, what are some of their options for doing that?
I mean, one of the quickest and easiest ways is to just go watch some videos and hit the subscribe button. We get some YouTube ad revenue, and that helps a bit. Real big one is becoming a patron on Patreon. So we've got over 1,000 patrons all over the world, and some people give us $1 a month, and some people give us $100 a month, and everything in between. And that's what really keeps the lights on and allows us to make payroll for Ben, the video editor, and Ann, who is my right hand and does all the behind the scenes stuff, and Kate, who's the current shipwright in the shop helping me out. And then after that, people make donations. We've got merchandise and things on the website. And none of them are huge money makers, but all of them combined let us to continue producing the videos and getting the boat built.
Yeah, you do have some cool posters, including one that shows the different tree species that went into the boat and where they came from, and really interesting.
Yeah, I like that one a lot. And if you look at it real closely, there's a tiny little key and there's tiny little symbols that show what each of the woods became in the boat, which I thought was kind of pretty cool as well. And it's one of those things you gotta look real close, which is fun.
Great. Well, we're as you mentioned, MFA is awarding Acorn Arabella the Friend of Forestry Award. It's an award designed to show the benefits of using local forest products and forestry in general, and so you've certainly done that and spread the gospel and the word to lots of folks. People love woodworking and wood products, but they don't necessarily love cutting trees, and so to see the whole process from start to finish really, I think, makes a big difference. So to present the award, Dick and Crane, our president, will actually make a short presentation here.
Okay. Well, I really would like to congratulate you, Stephen, on such an amazing project and the ability to get the public to recognize that working with wood and working with the forest is both a traditional Yankee thing to do, and the ingenuity with which you've been able to do it is really exciting to watch. And I think that as a friend of forestry, you represent that so well in the project and Arabella and everything about it. When I first heard about this project, I thought of it mostly as boat building, and I wasn't quite sure how it related to forestry, but everything I've seen in the YouTube videos and meeting you really ties the forestry and the importance of forest management to the end result very well, and you represent it as well as anyone I can imagine. So it's really a pleasure to be able to give you the Friends of Forestry Award, and I'm so happy to be able to watch the continuation of this project. It's very exciting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. That's great.
Terrific. Well, thanks so much, Steve. We really appreciate your time today, and congratulations on the award. And we wish you a lot of luck as you complete the project.
Oh, thank you very much. It's great to talk with you, and thanks for spreading the good word. I mean, forest management, like as you said, is incredibly important, and we are really proud and honored that we built this boat and this building and all of that. And there was not a single clear cut involved. There was not a single rainforest that was raided, and in a lot of ways, and actually pretty much always, the forests were better off for the trees that we cut. And like you said, that's something that's really misunderstood. And so thank you for helping to work with landowners and foresters and the general public and keep that tradition and that resource alive.
Thanks. And thanks again for all you've done to spread that message. Really appreciate it.
And thank you. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, take care. And we'll just get back up here. So it was really great to hand that award to Acorn to Arabella. We have one more award left, which is MFA's highest honor, the Jack Lambert Forest Stewardship Award. And to present that award will be Charlie Thompson.
Okay. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. The Lambert Award is named for Jack Lambert, who has been gone for a while now, but was a very important, thoughtful state forester, very committed to forestry. Some of you might be old enough to remember Jack. I do. This year's recipient is Jamie Damon, and a very humble fellow who actually lives in New Hampshire, and it's possible that he's not that well known to some of you, but he has been very important in promoting good forest stewardship in Massachusetts in both direct and indirect ways. Bill Hull did a good biography of Mike Bartlett. I am not going to do as exhaustive a biography for Jamie. I'll let him fill in any details he wants. He's worked in wood procurement for the earlier owners of the biomass power plant in Westminster. And I know that he worked with a number of wood suppliers over the years and always treated them fairly. And as everyone is very well aware, biomass has been the hottest of all hot button issues in Massachusetts for a number of years. And biomass markets have struggled and never reached the level that some of us wish they might have, but their existence nonetheless has made forest improvement operations possible on thousands of acres, and Jamie's been very much involved in that. But what I want to really emphasize is Jamie's contributions to MFA itself, and those contributions have allowed the organization to voice a viewpoint that otherwise would not be well represented in Massachusetts forest policy. Jamie was there when MFA was formed, and he was one of the most instrumental people making sure that it happened. I'd say he's been creative, loyal, and hardworking for all of MFA's current iteration. He's not only one of our largest donors, but he works as hard or harder than anyone else in generating support for the organization. He's a consistent source of new ideas. He participates faithfully in almost every aspect of MSA's work. I'd say he's collaborative, he's thoughtful, and it's never been easy for the people who actually work in the woods to have a seat at the most important forest policy tables. I'd say that MFA has made some progress recently in that area, and no one is more responsible for enabling that than Jamie Damon. So Jamie, congratulations, and happy to present you with this award.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Thanks for those kind words, Charlie. I'm not sure I deserve the honor, seeing as how I'm from New Hampshire. However, I can say my motivation for getting involved with MFA from its outset really stems from the notion that the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is really at the center of organized opposition to forestry in general. And that really bothered me. I've been involved with our sister organization in New Hampshire since the early 80s. That's the New Hampshire Timberland Owners Association. NHTOA was a small struggling organization back then. That's going back 40 years now, I hate to say. And since that time, that organization has grown exponentially and is universally recognized as a very effective in helping landowners manage their lands as they wish, and helping foresters, aiding landowners in a professional manner, and helping timber harvesters and wood markets to exist without undue interference from unnecessary regulations. Bottom line is that when NHTOA talks in New Hampshire, legislators listen, and that access is invaluable. The MFA has made great progress in our 8 years of existence, but there's much work that still needs to be done. We have a great, and I mean great, executive director in Chris. He's doing a fantastic job, but we need to support him. So here goes my fundraising pitch, because I'm the treasurer. Please help support the MFA this fall as we start our fall fundraising campaign. Further, please tell your friends and your colleagues who are not members of MFA to please join us, as we need to expand our membership if we are be able to be increasingly effective going forward. Again, thanks very much for the honor of this award, and I'll give it back to Chris.
Thank you, Jamie. Really, this award is very well deserved, and Jamie's been a tremendous asset and help to me personally from my very early days when he took me around to job sites and helped me meet some of our members. And really, Jamie's got a tremendous list of contacts and mobilizes them on our behalf during fundraising season. So be prepared to get a call or text or email from Jamie. I wanted to recognize our donors. They are listed in our program book. This is just some of our larger donors over the last year. And you'll see Jamie's name at the top there. But we're greatly appreciative to everyone who helps us out financially. Our dues revenue just isn't enough to, continue the work of the organization. Beyond that, we need contributions to our annual fund. And we launch that every November, so it'll be coming into your mailboxes shortly. We hope that you'll consider making a gift, as many of you do every year, for which we're very grateful. And that will help us continue to grow, continue to become a good voice for forest products in Massachusetts and the benefits of sustainable forest management. So, really appreciate everyone who makes a contribution every year. And thanks again to Jamie for this, for all of his work over the years. Now up next, we are going to give a brief legislative update at the end of this meeting, and going to ask our policy committee chair, Evan Dell'Olio, to perhaps walk us through these slides.
Thank you, Chris. Greatly appreciate it. And I just wanted to say first that the policy committee is very appreciative of all the support that all of you provide the organization with, which makes this possible. We certainly couldn't do it without our volunteer policy committee members, and of course, the leadership of Chris as our executive director, and also our lobbyist, Dan Bosley, as well. So very appreciative of all of that. So to walk you through some of these slides, we had an extremely busy year as a policy committee. We had things coming at us from all different sides, and I think that the policy committee provided very strong leadership on a number of issues. The legislative update begins with the 2025-2030 Clean Energy and Climate Plan. This is a report that was released by the Baker administration that came down from a 2021 law, which required that it be put into effect. And it touches on a number of different industries, but in particular for our purposes, There are recommendations for natural and working lands as they relate to climate change. One of the recommendations that came out of the proposal was a forest resilience program. As it states here, that would be a climate-friendly forest management incentive for landowners. Essentially, it would be a 20-year program, which landowners could enroll their land into the program for, and it would provide payments for this work in writing the management plan and for performing climate-smart forestry practices on your property. As Chris noted in this slide, it's very similar to the Family Forest Carbon Program and pilot payments for towns, but in this case, going to the landowner. It also includes a forest viability program recommendation. The purpose of this is that the individuals at the state level and also some of the advisors to this process realize that our domestic local sawmills in Massachusetts have been struggling to compete in some ways. And the idea here is that we could reinvigorate local mills. Part of the purpose of this is to increase utilization of logs that are brought to mills and to potentially also saw smaller diameter timber into usable boards. There's some potential opportunities here that would come out of this as well for improving energy efficiency, access to energy for mills, and other upgrades when it comes to technology and equipment. There's still, of course, some work to do in creating these programs, but this is a recommendation to be implemented over the next few years. There's also a recommendation coming out of this as it regards to utilization to encourage mass timber use in Massachusetts and to encourage the use of more buildings, more structures out of long living wood products. So some very positive news there that the organizational component to this realized that we need to do more to build with wood. So that's good for the industry. And the last piece to this is that there is to be further research that will be conducted primarily in Massachusetts as it relates to surveying the mills and essentially also working with timber harvesters to understand the final destinations of logs. Some of this may even include tracking of forest products as part of a cutting plan, and also those logs that are procured through other means, such as through small cuts that are not subject to Chapter 132, or to also track logs from land clearing as well. So definitely something we'll continue to keep you updated on over the next several months as these ideas are implemented. The climate bill, this was a big topic this year. Early in the year, MFA had been working on advocating for and against a number of bills. There was one bill that was sponsored by Senator Eric Lesser that I know that we certainly were in touch with many of you on over the last year, and this was Senate Bill 2197. The bill was very damaging to the wood energy sector, as it would have essentially eliminated both biomass electric as well as modern biomass thermal heating, modern wood heating, from participating in the state's renewable portfolio programs. MFA put together an organization called the Good Wood Coalition, included a number of nonprofits, businesses, member businesses, farms, out of state, large mills and other wood users, and assembled this coalition to advocate against the bill, and particularly against the idea that the concepts in this bill be included in the final climate bill that would eventually be brought through the process to becoming law. We met every Friday for a number of weeks throughout the spring, hosted meetings and were part of meetings with legislators, worked with legislators that are friends of ours in terms of being friends of forestry. And the end result was that we did save modern wood heating in the APS through the hard efforts of everyone on this committee. It was not easy. There was certainly a lot of motivation to remove that from people against this. However, as part of the process, while we had a win there, biomass electric was removed from the renewable portfolio standard. Essentially, as we know for many years now, large plants were not efficient enough to qualify for the RPS based on the Manomet study. It did impact, however, smaller CHP facilities, modern technologies such as gasification. But again, the modern wood heating aspect was not impacted. So we'll continue to monitor this issue, particularly based off of interest by some of those opposed to modern wood heating, continuing to have influence in the legislature going forward. For other renewable energy program updates, We had notified many of you earlier in the year that the Baker administration was delayed due to COVID in releasing new thermal credit APS updated regulations. The idea was that a proposal was put forward to increase the value of credits for users of these systems. However, the Baker administration essentially has decided to move this forward into the next gubernatorial administration. So it will be the next governor and their administration that has influence on this. And we'll keep you updated in the new year as that process unfolds. Legislatively, there's some active bills that are currently still in process in the legislature. Of course, it's very late in season, but there are still some opportunities to pass these bills, and we're still advocating for them. One of them is Senate Bill 543. And this is a bill that was sponsored by Senator Ann Goby from Spencer. It revises overweight truck permits for those with farm plates. And essentially what it does is it allows you to pay for more than one permit per plate, not per truck. So you could have 2, 3, 4 trucks and only pay for one fee. So this is essentially very good for people that have more than one log truck on the road. And the hope is that we can get this forward. And it's something that we were very happy to work with the senator on. Another bill that was very important to us in this legislative session that is moving forward is House Bill 3531. And this bill was sponsored by State Representative Paul Mark of Peru. And it would change weight permits to permit the use of pup trailers for hauling of agricultural goods, including logs, considering forestry and lumbering as part of agriculture in Massachusetts. And essentially what it does is it creates a situation where it increases the weight limit to 99,000 pounds under an overweight permit as a combination of truck and trailer. As some of you may know, for many years, it's not that Pindle hook trailers are not allowed in Massachusetts, but it's that you essentially can't carry anything more than the gross vehicle weight of the trailer. So you can only tow an empty trailer around. It's not very effective for our members. Both of these bills are very important because, as you know, we advocate for all areas of the forest sector. But these bills are very important for timber harvesting members and some of the sawmills, of course, in Massachusetts. So really hoping to get these moving forward as the legislature continues to wind down towards the holidays. I also just wanted to mention that the committee, while these two bills are going forward, hopefully, and will continue to advocate, we have had a number of bills that we successfully advocated against. I believe there are at least 4 bills this year, in addition to the one that we already discussed that attempted to remove modern wood heat from the APS. There were bills to severely limit cutting on state land, both DCR land and also, as well as Mass Fish and Wildlife and reservoir properties. There were bills to redefine old growth to limit timber harvesters from being able to access older second growth timber potentially. So many things that we're advocating for all the members on, and we hope to keep doing that in the new year, thanks to your support, of course. Now, the last piece is the potential MFA bills for next session. Our committee will be meeting after Thanksgiving at some point to reconvene for the new year and to begin creating a legislative agenda for the new legislative session for 2023. If the above bills, if they do not pass, the pup trailer bill and the overweight bill, we will advocate for those and refile those with supporting legislators. Another idea is that we intend to fix Chapter 61 lien issues, similar to Vermont. As some of you may know, there's been an issue that has been occurring in Massachusetts as it relates to essentially the lien on your property in Chapter 61 affecting the ability to refinance property with lenders. That's impacting forest landowners, members. So hoping to really hit that this year. And the last piece is we really would like you to tell us your priorities. We're here to advocate for you. We're here to advocate for your issues. And our intent is to go forward in the new year, very much so in support of good forestry and all of our members. So thanks for allowing me some time, Chris, to address these items.
Great. Yeah, thanks very much, Evan. Really appreciate it. And all your hard work as policy committee chair and as a member of our board. Well, that brings us to the end of our meeting. Just a reminder about credit certificates. So again, we'll get a report from Zoom of who attended. We'll make the credit certificates and we'll send them to you by email, the same email you used to register for the meeting. And please give us till next Friday, but they will all go out by next Friday. So over the next week, over the next 7 days, you should get your credit certificate. My contact information is there. If you have any issues with credits or really with anything else, please feel free to give me a call or shoot me an email. Always happy to talk to people, help you with problems you're encountering, figure things out, or listen to your concerns and areas we should be focusing more on going forward. So thanks again to our sponsors, Farm Credit East and Berry Equipment, for making this meeting possible. And thanks to all of you for attending. Really appreciate it. We'll get this meeting up on our YouTube channel next week. And thanks to everyone for being here. We really appreciate it. So take care, everyone.